So I've got this, just a small wasp's nest that I found in one of my eaves. You know how they work. You take them apart, there's little bits in here. And I thought it would be really cool to have this sphere mold for resin. I'm gonna see if I can encapsulate that, cast that in a resin sphere, clear resin sphere. And I think first I better seal it. So I have this Mod Podge. Right. I just want to put a bit of pearl white on a pigment, just to, I'm going to dust it over top. Just to give it something. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. So I have this sphere. It's all nice silicone sphere mold. And I think there's not much to do but place that inside. I think it's going to work out fairly well because it fits really well in there. Okay. See, it's the way we like it. And I'm going to place it on so that the hole is so that the hole in the wasp's nest lines up with the fill hole. Okay, and then we need to tape it around the edges because it's always leaking. These molds, they always leak under the weight of the resin. Once you put the resin in, it pushes on the sides and it leaks out. I'll put a little fold in the end of my tape so that I don't have problems undoing it afterwards. Right, now we just need to mix L resin. It's a bummer not to have gloves for this. Okay. Nothing left to do but pour it. So now we have to pour it as carefully and slowly as possible. So let's get comfy. Fill it as patiently as possible. It also will reduce the bubbles. I don't have a pressure pot or anything like that, so I'm using a good off-gassing resin, but the slower I go, the less large bubbles there will be to contend with. It's not a very big hole for the bubbles to escape from. I can see in my mold the air bubble still, and if I pour it slowly enough, hopefully it'll fill that in. So there's no air. I'm going to overfill till there's a bump on top. And come back and check, because as it off gases, I believe the level is going to drop a bit. There's a bubble there. I see. Is it working its way out? We're going to have bubbles. If you take something like this is just a wire with some kind of end still soldered on, but get it in there and you can kind of get these bubbles out. We don't want these bubbles. See how there's already a depression instead of a bump? So this extra resin I'm going to use it periodically to come and check and just top that up. I also have this pyramid mold that I like to use always as it's my favorite one to use as an extra when you have leftover resin. The reason I like this as a leftover mold for leftover resin is because no matter how much you put in it, it'll always make a nice little pyramid. So even if it's just a tiny bit of leftover resin, you'll get a pyramid, just a smaller one. As long as there's a bubble, I don't care if there's a bit of air bubbles on this, because that will be sanded off anyway when the piece gets finished. So now we just hope it doesn't bubble too much and fill the sphere full of bubbles. And I'll come back periodically and check to make sure there's still a bit of a hump there rather than a depression, and top up as necessary with the extra out of my pyramid mold. And that's it. 24 hours. All right, next day, about the same time. I can see there's gonna maybe be a bubble in that. Man, it's hard to do. Anyway, let's see how it looks. You can definitely see it in there. It's cool, but we'll need to polish that sucker up. A little pyramid. Nothing fancy, just a pyramid bun. Good thing to do while it's still damp, while the resin hasn't fully cured yet, is to just take this seam off as best you can, because it'll be easier to get it off now than it will be to get it off when it's cured, fully cured. You have to sand it off, and then it's harder to do. What I'm going to do now is get rid of the seams and stuff. So I have various grits of sandpaper, all various grits, all the way up to 2000. So I'm gonna sand all the surfaces till they're smooth and get this fresh resin sheen. It's like a very bad glare. Get that all off. That happens when you freshly pour the resin. There's always a glare on it. So if you sand that off and then get it smooth again with the various grits of sandpaper, and then buff it with some car wax or something at the end, should clear it up and get rid of all these seams and make it look more like a proper sphere. So that's the next step. Like a 120 and then a 220, and then we'll go into the high grits with some wet sanding. So it looks like a pretty good sphere. And the seam's pretty much gone, and I got a lot of that surface bubbling out. I'm gonna wet sand it now and see if I'm gonna leave some of these little bubbles, but because I don't want to sand it down too far. So I've done my sanding, and I've done all my by hand, and I wet sanded it to 2000, and the sheen is not as bad anymore. And back to clear, and it's got a nice smooth appearance. And I just left the imperfection because I'm not going to put that much time into this piece, but I just wanted to see what it would look like to cast some wasp nest in a ball. So anyway, next thing, I just have some car wax, car polish, and I have a buffing wheel and a drill. And I'm going to buff the heck out of this thing, and hopefully that clears it up to a really nice viewing clarity. It's not bad, it's getting there. pretty cool. Look at how you see the inside. It's neat. Now mine has a bit of tiny bubbles in it and stuff. It's just the way it is without a pressure pot. It's really hard to do it any other way, but man, is that ever cool. The only thing I really don't like, so there's a couple of pock marks. You could fix that by recoating it in resin and then sanding it down again, but I'm just gonna go out and get my air compressor. I'm gonna blow the crap. It's just probably just sanding dust in there, and because I did such a nice buffing job, there's a imperfection here, but you really don't see it, and it's looking cool. Wasp nest.